Well, Souls-like fans, Mortal Shell 2 is almost here. It launches on August the 20th, which is 1 week from now. And the early word on this one has been rolling in for weeks because there has been an open beta running that anybody could download. So the question everyone is circling is a simple one. Is this the sequel where Cold Symmetry finally works out what Mortal Shell is actually supposed to be? Or is it just a bigger version of a game that was always a bit rough around the edges? Today we are going through everything people who have played it are saying, what they loved and what they are worried about. I will also show you where the opinions genuinely split, because on one of these there is no consensus at all. No spoilers here, and let us dive in. First, why we know so much about a game that is not out. There is a free open beta and it is still live right now. It started on Steam and then arrived on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series consoles at the end of July. PC Gamer reported 250,000 downloads over the first weekend alone. It has since passed 600,000 downloads at a 93% positive rating. So this is not 4 outlets with a preview build. This is hundreds of thousands of ordinary players alongside the journalists. You get roughly 3 hours covering the prologue and the first open zone. With 2 shells to play, your progress carries into the full game, and there is still no announced end date for it. On Steam, it currently sits at very positive. But keep the limits in mind as we go through this. Everybody is judging the opening hours of the game with 2 shells available. Nobody outside the studio has seen the back half or the later bosses. Nobody knows how the whole thing holds together. That caveat sits under every single opinion in this video. Let us start where everybody starts. Mortal Shell 2 has removed stamina completely, and there is no stamina bar at all. In a genre where stamina is close to sacred, that sounded genuinely reckless on paper, and the obvious worry was that combat would collapse into mashing the attack button. According to people playing it, that has not happened. Games Radar described the combat as extremely heavy, while saying the sequel no longer carries the clunkiness the first game had. Their read was that once the parry system clicks, it becomes significantly more satisfying. One beta player put the reason well. They said removing stamina initially worried them, but enemy grouping and tougher enemies resisting, staggers stopped, fights becoming spam. That is the important bit. Something has to do the job stamina used to do, and here it seems to be pressure from the enemies themselves. What replaced it is a posture system. Enemies carry a visible posture meter, and the goal is to break it and then punish them while they are vulnerable. So the question the combat asks has changed. It is no longer how many swings can I afford before I run out. It is how much pressure can I keep on before this thing takes control back. The finishers have had a lot of attention too. One preview specifically praised how naturally they fit into normal combos instead of interrupting the flow of a fight. Defensively, there is now color coding on enemy attacks. Red marks attacks you cannot simply block, while yellow marks the ones you can parry. Some hardcore players will call that hand holding. Personally, I would rather know why I got hit, but that one is going to divide people. Now, here is a change that longtime fans need to know about. Hardening was the first game's signature move, turning to stone mid-animation to absorb a hit, then carrying on with your attack. It still exists, but it is no longer the universal default the way it was. Hardening is now tied to a defensive seal called Batra seal. Other seals give you completely different defensive options instead. So your defense has become a build choice rather than something everybody shares. That is a big philosophical shift for the series. Whether that feels like more freedom or like losing what made Mortal Shell distinctive is an open question. It will come down to which seal you end up preferring. And honestly, we will not know how that lands until people have the full game and every seal in it. The beta only hands you a slice of that system. The shells are where the sequel has grown most obviously. There are 9 shells in the game overall. 8 of those are playable beyond the opening, with Harrow serving as the prologue shell. That is double the 4 primary shells the original had. Aerodrome returns and Proxima the Broodseeker is one of the new ones, and what people who played the beta keep pointing out is that these are not stat presets with different armor. Take Teal as an example. He has an ability called Shadow Strike that moves him through objects to land a surprise dagger attack. There is also a system for the fiction of it. At Marrowkeep, a shellkeeper named Zero lets you experience the memories attached to each shell and develop their powers through bonding. The concept of wearing dead warriors was always the best idea in this series. It sounds like the sequel is finally interested in it. Underneath the shells sits the part that surprised me most. Mortal Shell 2 is running several progression systems at once. You have the Harbinger and each shell progressing separately. Then there are seals plus weapons and sidearms. And on top of all that sit the Tarstones. Gloom is the currency for improving the Harbinger. You earn it from kills and spend it at beacons, and because this is still a Souls-like, you drop it when you die and have to go back for it. Tarstones are the build layer. The beta alone contains 14 discoverable ones. They span support and combat, plus infusion and ability categories. Players report being able to equip up to 10 at once, with different slots applying to your primary weapon and your sidearm. So your shell sets the foundation and your weapon changes your attacks. Your seal decides how you defend, and the Tarstones modify all of it. The original had customization. This looks like it genuinely wants you making builds. Then there are the guns, because somebody at Cold Symmetry decided a Souls-like needed firearms. Recent breakdowns put the full game at 8 primary weapons alongside 8 secondary firearms. That is a big jump on the original, and the impressions are that they are not bolted on. There has been consistent praise for how the shooting and the melee flow together. The shotgun style weapon available early in the beta gets mentioned a lot. One observation I found more interesting is that enemies appear to have a mild rock, paper, scissors structure. Different opponents respond better to different attacks and different damage types, so the weapon variety may not be cosmetic. Quick one for the comments while we are here. Do guns belong in a Souls-like, or is that a line? The open world is the thing I think decides whether this is good or genuinely great. Cold Symmetry described it as interconnected and expansive, yet deliberately compact, and the early impressions on that are encouraging. Kagi Connected called the game bigger and better and described the first major beta area as significantly larger than anything in the original. Their read was that the world immediately feels more open and alive. Another hands-on impression said almost every turn led toward another dungeon or a mini-boss rather than empty wandering. The studio is promising more than 60 dungeons across the full game. Now I want to be careful with that number. Nobody has said those are 60 enormous legacy dungeons. Plenty will be smaller caves and hidden areas, and the beta only covers the opening hours, so whether that density holds for the whole game is the biggest open question hanging over this. One thing basically nobody is arguing about is how it looks. Art direction was never the first game's problem, and the sequel has pushed much harder. The bosses in particular have been getting a reaction. You get enormous deformed creatures and organic architecture, ruined castles and swamps fill out the rest, and IXBT specifically praised the sheer scale of the locations in their hands-on. For a studio this size, the consistent line is that it does not look like a Dark Souls copy anymore. It looks like its own thing. That matters more than it might sound. The first game got compared to From Software's work constantly and usually not in its favor. If the sequel has finally escaped that comparison, that is a real achievement for a team this small. And the finisher animations seem to be where a lot of that personality is landing. People keep describing them as genuinely nasty. Right, the concerns, and there are real ones here. The most consistently raised issue by a distance is the camera. Multiple players have said it becomes difficult to manage when you are fighting groups or when you get pushed into a corner. A separate hands-on write-up from IXBT listed the frantic camera during battles as one of its 2 biggest complaints. The other was NPCs that felt thin, but here's the part that makes running a beta worth it. Cold Symmetry have already added an additional camera mode with a wider viewing angle. They also patched the beta across multiple public builds. Those covered crashes and camera issues. Targeting, bosses, and controls were in there too. So the complaint has been heard and something concrete has actually shipped. Whether it fixes the problem in the full game, we will not know until launch. Performance is messier because the reports genuinely conflict. Some players say it runs beautifully. One hands-on review said performance stayed stable, even during larger fights with a lot happening on screen. IXBT also called the frame rate stable in their preview. But others report the opposite. One Steam user reported roughly 70 frames at 4K with balanced upscaling. They were running a Radeon 7900 XT and a Ryzen 5800X 3D. Their view was that it should have been stronger for that hardware, and some beta players describe persistent stuttering regardless of their graphic settings. I would not call this badly optimized because there is not enough evidence for that, but I would not call it solved either. And remember, this is a beta build, not the launch build. That cuts both ways. The console side has been the strongest signal of the lot. Until the end of July, almost everything we had came from PC. Then the beta arrived on PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series, and the response has been notably positive. Pure Xbox reported the reaction among Xbox players as heavily positive, with people specifically praising the smoothness and the leap from the first game. 5-star ratings have been piling up on the Xbox page. The PlayStation 5 version is also listed as PS5 Pro Enhanced, and the phrase that keeps coming back from people who played the original is night and day, and that comparison carries weight when you remember what the original was. Cold Symmetry built the first Mortal Shell with roughly 15 people. It landed in the mid-70s on Metacritic and picked up a Best Debut nomination at the Game Awards. It has passed 1 million copies since, so this is not a studio stumbling into a sequel. It is a small team that already proved it can punch above its weight once. So where does that leave us a week out? And nobody has finished the game, but the shape of the early word is unusually consistent. Games Radar said it had suddenly become one of their most anticipated Souls-likes. Coggy Connected called it bigger and better. Cold Symmetry themselves said the beta response has been incredible and that they have begun fixing bugs and tightening the experience. My personal read is that this looks like a genuine leap rather than a bigger version of the same game. The caveats are real though. The camera needs watching and performance is still unresolved, and the beta only covers the opening hours. On length, Gaming Bolt reported around 30 hours for a standard playthrough. The studio has not confirmed that number, so treat it as a report and not a fact. If you love this genre, the free beta makes the decision easy. If you're on the fence, the honest answer is simpler. We will not really know how this holds up until people have played the whole thing. And that is the early word on Mortal Shell 2. If you want to judge it for yourself, the beta is free and still live on all 3 platforms. We have got a Before You Buy landing a few days before launch with my full take, so subscribe and turn on notifications if you want that. Now, I want to hear from you down in the comments. Did you play the beta and did removing stamina work for you or ruin it? And which shell are you starting with? Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one.